Russia is implying is that things can change, and if there's a change in leadership in Congress and a change in political point of view, then everything's up for grabs. But ultimately, that's the decision of the American people. Who do you want representing you, and what direction do you want the country to go in? And there are implications when there is an election, and if there's a change of leadership, I'm sure a lot of these issues will be revisited.
Richard in Connecticut Independent Line, good morning.
Good morning. When I go and purchase something from a merchant, I continually ask, any discount for cash? And they say no. Now, if they gave me a 0.5% or 1%, they'd be ahead, and I'd be ahead.
Well,
but it seems business, I don't know where they have their head. What they like is the credit card company does their accounting for them, and the cash is there immediately. They don't even have to go to the bank.
Well, Richard, I have good news for you, because I forgot to mention this. Merchants can now give a cash discount. Under the old rules, the credit card companies prohibited them, with the contract they imposed on your merchant, they prohibited them from giving a cash discount. It's outrageous. And if a merchant tried to put a limit, like say a $10 minimum on using a credit card, then the credit card companies hammered them and said they would take away their ability to use credit cards at all. You know, this week I was in Mocha Joe's coffee shop in downtown Brattleboro, Vermont, and the owners there, a husband and wife, were telling me how they were inspected by one of the credit card companies, and when they were having a $10 minimum, they actually had a $6 minimum. They were threatened to lose their credit card transaction ability. So in that legislation that I mentioned, there's a $10 minimum, but also the ability of the merchant to give you that 0.5% cash discount that you're talking about. So thank you.
Representative Peter Welch is our guest, Democrat representing all of Vermont in the U.S. House of Representatives. Let's go to our next caller. Lenny, Democrats Line in Brooklyn. Hi there.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning, Lenny.
Good morning, Lenny.
Yes, my problem is somebody had bought a house in my name 25 years ago, and of course, he lived at the house, and to make a story short, he died, and when the house is in my name, and there was some lien against the house. Now, I tried to get to pay off the lien, but I am on disability and I have very limited income. And I asked Citibank just to lend me the money because the house is now valued at $600,000. And I asked Citibank, who has the mortgage on the house, to lend me the $33,000 to pay off the lien. And they refused. Now, this is the same bank that our tax money was helped for their recovery, and they're refusing to lend me $33,000 to pay off a lien against the very house that they have a mortgage on.
Well, I'm not sure I can be helpful. The banks need to be lending more money. You know, we went from the banks lending money recklessly and indiscriminately to the banks not lending money at all. And obviously they have to do underwriting and try to figure out whether whatever loan they're going to give, including the one that you're asking for, whether the person borrowing has the ability to pay it back. But I think the point you're making is a good one, namely that a lot of these banks that ran us into the ditch and then came to the taxpayer for bailout are now refusing to be banks and to make loans that are wise, prudent, and really necessary to help get our economy back on track.
Let's hear from one of your constituents. Roxanne is on our Independent Line calling from Colchester, Vermont.
Yes, hi.
Hi.
Since the legislation has passed, I am an artist, and I sell seasonally, meaning some months I'm closed up, and then other months when the tourist season, which is our biggest draw here in Vermont, I am selling my artwork and things at different shows and stuff like that throughout Vermont. However, since the legislation has passed, you quoted rates being 2 to 3%. They are actually 3 to 5%.
Really?
Majority of them being 5%. Oh, yes. Not only that, since the legislation has passed, they now charge $5 for paper statements. They charge $10 for services. They've added on all these charges that previously did not exist. So instead of helping the situation and alleviating it, actually, with the legislation, the credit cards got ahead of everything and just kind of padded their wallets, and now the little consumer is, the little shopkeeper is at their mercy. So things haven't really gotten better; they actually have gotten worse.
Well, two things. First of all, I'm not surprised to hear you say that. Because what we're seeing is that as we're trying to crack down on overcharges, say in healthcare by the insurance companies, and now the banks with credit card charges, as the legislation is about to be implemented, they start doing exactly what you said, finding ways to try to pad the fees, raise the rates, do all those things that are ripping off consumers, in your case, an artist. But secondly, one of the things we were not able to pass in this Wall Street Reform Act was credit card regulation on the credit card transactions as opposed to the debit transactions. When you use a credit card, it can be for debit, which means it comes right out of the person's bank account. It's just like writing a check. Or credit, where you pay your statement at the end of the month to the credit card company. And that part of the legislation is not in the Wall Street Reform Act, and we've got to push ahead. Now, as far as what they've done in padding the bills, that's the type of thing we're going to be discussing with Chairman Bernanke, because the rules to implement the Wall Street reform on these debit transactions have not been written. They're in the process of being considered now. And the kind of information that you provided is exactly what we'll be talking to Chairman Bernanke about, because these banks are just trying to get ahead of the regulation and the safeguards that we're trying to put in place so that you don't get ripped off.
In other news, the Energy and Commerce Oversight Subcommittee meets today to talk about salmonella poisoning. Right. You sit on that committee. Give us a preview.
Well, salmonella, this whole issue came up with the Hillendale egg recall, that Iowa farm where there were millions of eggs that were sent out, and it resulted in an outbreak of salmonella poisoning, and I think close to 1,500 cases, and obviously incredibly serious. And it turned out that this particular egg farm had hundreds of violations and salmonella warnings with no follow-through. And obviously, one of the most important public protection responsibilities of the government is to make certain that the food that we buy in our stores is safe and healthy. And what we found in doing the investigation about the breakdown in oversight is that we've got a very uncoordinated to trying to protect food safety. The major responsibility is between the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, and the Department of Agriculture. But we had a situation where on a big egg farm, where the eggs were laid, would be monitored by one governmental agency, and then in the building right next door where the eggs were packaged, it would be regulated by another governmental entity, and they would never talk to each other. So the point of this legislation, which passed the House, went to the Senate and is now coming back, is essentially, A, to make certain that we have better inspection, 2, we have better coordination among the inspectors, 3, we have stronger recall provisions so that in the event there is an outbreak of anything, there can be a compulsory recall immediately in order to protect the public. So this is overdue legislation that I think will be beneficial to providing peace of mind to American consumers that their food is safe.
And C-SPAN will be airing that hearing today on C-SPAN 3
Great.
At noon. So we'll be hearing from you then. Now, you voted last year against the Food Safety Enhancement Act, which was different than what a lot of Democrats did. Why?
Well, I did. There was one provision in there that was really going to hammer the small farms. In Vermont, we have a lot of very small farmers, vegetable and fruit producers, and also cheese makers. And under the original provision in the House, every single food producer was going to pay a flat fee of $1,000. So Jasper Hill Farm, which has about $600,000 in cheese sales a year, was going to pay $1,000. ConAgra, which has $43 billion in sales, was going to pay $1,000. Now, coming from a small state where we're dependent on the Jasper Hill farms, I didn't think that was fair. So I introduced an amendment, and in the House we got that lowered to $500, but I still thought that was unfair. The Senate bill basically addressed this, so the small producers are not going to be hit with that kind of fee. They're willing to pay, but it should be fair and it should be proportionate. So assuming that we're